I knew the moment the envelope arrived that it wasn't just paper inside. It was a message, a declaration, a final attempt to shrink me back into the version of myself my parents always preferred. Quiet, doubtful, dependent. The return address carried their lawyer's name. For a long time, I didn't open it. I let it sit on my kitchen counter in the house I had bought with my own savings, in the sunlight that spilled across floors I had chosen, walls I had painted, furniture I had carried in piece by piece without anyone's help. This house was proof that I was capable, stable, responsible. But when I finally slit the envelope open, the words inside felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. They were petitioning the court for conservatorship. They claimed I was financially unstable, emotionally unfit, incapable of managing my own assets. They wanted control of my savings, my home, my business accounts, everything. She is unstable. We can manage her. That sentence was written in cold legal language, but I could hear my mother's voice behind it. I had heard variations of it my entire life. When I cried too much as a child, I was dramatic. When I defended myself as a teenager, I was disrespectful. When I moved out and refused to ask for money, I was reckless. When I succeeded without them, I was mentally spiraling. Success, apparently, was my most suspicious trait. I built my business from nothing. Long nights, early mornings, rejections stacked like unpaid bills. I saved every extra dollar. I bought this house at 29 without a cosigner, without inheritance, without help. I paid off my debts methodically. I tracked every expense in spreadsheets so detailed they could have been textbooks. Unstable. That word echoed in my mind for days. The hearing was scheduled quickly, too quickly, as if they had been planning this for a long time. When I walked into the courthouse, the air felt heavy and overconditioned. My parents were already there. My father sat straight-backed, hands folded like he was attending a business meeting. My mother wore a soft expression that might have fooled strangers into thinking she was heartbroken rather than strategic. And my sister. She avoided my eyes. Maya had always been quieter than me, softer. She was the one who learned early that survival in our house meant agreement. If they said the sky was green, you nodded. If they said I was difficult, you stayed silent. But that morning, her silence felt heavier than usual. Their lawyer was a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a measured smile. He shook my parents' hands with confidence. When he looked at me, his expression shifted, polite but assessing, as though I were already a case study. Inside the courtroom, I sat alone at my table. My attorney whispered reassurance, but I barely heard her. I kept looking at my parents, searching their faces for something human. Hesitation, regret, doubt. There was none. When it was their turn to speak, my mother's voice trembled just enough to sound convincing. "We're only doing this because we love her," she said. "She's been making irrational financial decisions. We're worried about her mental health." My father nodded solemnly. "She isolates herself. She doesn't listen to reason. We believe she's unstable. We can manage her affairs responsibly." Manage her. As if I were an account, a project, a liability. The judge listened carefully. The lawyer beside my parents nodded as though everything they said had already been confirmed. Then he stood. He carried a slim black folder and walked toward the evidence screen. His movements were calm, deliberate, the kind of calm that either wins cases or ends them. "We've prepared documentation to demonstrate financial instability," he began. He opened the file. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the microphone could pick it up. The screen flickered on. A DocuSign header appeared at the top of the projection. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Let's review the payment history," he said evenly. And that was when everything began to change. The glow of the projector washed the courtroom walls in pale blue light. My name appeared at the top of the DocuSign account, bold and unmistakable. Beneath it were rows of digital confirmations, dates, amounts, signatures, clean, organized, methodical. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. As the petition claims financial instability, we reviewed the full transaction history for the past 4 years. My mother shifted in her seat. My father's jaw tightened slightly, but he remained composed. Maya stared at the table. The lawyer scrolled. The first few entries were ordinary: business expenses, tax payments, utility transfers. My budgeting system was almost painfully precise. Every outgoing dollar labeled, every contract digitally signed. There were no gambling charges, no impulsive purchases, no unexplained withdrawals. Nothing that resembled recklessness. He paused. "Let's focus on recurring transfers," he said. A filtered list appeared on the screen. Monthly transactions. Same recipient, same routing number, my father's account. A small murmur moved through the room. "For the record," the lawyer continued, his voice steady, "these transfers began approximately 5 years ago." He clicked the first one open. The amount was substantial, far more than a casual gift. Then he read the payment reason aloud. "Mortgage support, you said you were behind." Silence. My mother's fingers tightened around her purse strap. He opened the next month. "Mortgage support, late fee included. Please confirm payment received." Another. "Property tax installment. Don't tell Maya, she doesn't need to worry." My throat felt dry, but I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The lawyer kept scrolling, month after month, year after year. The pattern was undeniable. Then he filtered another recurring recipient, Maya's university. Her tuition payments appeared neatly arranged in columns. He clicked one. "Tuition installment. Study hard. I'm proud of you." My sister's breathing became audible, quick, uneven. The lawyer glanced briefly toward the judge before continuing. "These transfers represent over 60% of Ms. Carter's annual post-tax income during several of these years." He let that settle. "Additionally," he added, "medical expenses were covered during the same period." He opened another entry. "Hospital deductible. I know you won't ask, so I'm sending it." My mother's composure cracked for a second, a flicker in her expression, something between panic and disbelief. This was not the narrative they had prepared. The petition had framed me as impulsive, emotionally erratic, financially irresponsible, but the screen showed something else entirely: consistency, sacrifice, planning. The lawyer adjusted the zoom and continued scrolling until he reached the most recent entries. "These payments," he said carefully, "continued up until 3 months ago." He clicked the final document. The amount was larger than the others. A lump sum transfer. The courtroom felt too small, too quiet. He began reading the payment reason slowly. "Final payment. The mortgage is cleared as agreed. After today, you are financially independent. I wish you peace." The words echoed differently than everything else. Softer. Final. He stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. My sister suddenly looked up, her face drained of color. "Stop," she whispered, barely audible. The lawyer glanced at her. She swallowed. "Read that again." He did. "Final payment. The mortgage is cleared as agreed. After today, you are financially independent. I wish you peace." The judge leaned forward slightly. My father's composure finally fractured. A muscle in his cheek twitched. My mother's lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. There was no instability here. There was no recklessness. There was only a record of someone who had quietly carried an entire family's financial weight without recognition. The lawyer closed the document and turned toward the bench. "To clarify," he said, "the petitioner's claim suggests Ms. Carter is incapable of managing her finances. However, the evidence demonstrates sustained financial discipline, long-term planning, and consistent support provided to the petitioners themselves." He let the sentence hang. No one looked at me now as if I were fragile. They looked at my parents. And for the first time in my life, the story being told in a room, under oath, under law, under light, was not theirs. It was mine. The courtroom no longer felt like a place where I was being examined. It felt like a room where something buried was finally being uncovered. The judge requested a short recess. My parents huddled with their lawyer near the back wall. Their earlier confidence had drained into tight whispers and rigid shoulders. Maya stood apart from them, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the floor as if it might split open and swallow her. I stayed seated. For years, I had rehearsed speeches in my head, the things I would say if they ever tried to rewrite my life in front of others. But now, I didn't need rehearsed words. The documents had spoken with more clarity than I ever could. When the session resumed, the judge's tone had shifted. "Counsel," he said to my parents' attorney, "the court needs clarification. The petition alleges financial mismanagement and mental instability. Yet the evidence presented suggests structured budgeting, consistent support payments, and long-term financial planning." My father straightened. "Your Honor, she has always been emotional. She isolates herself. She makes decisions without consulting family." The word emotional floated in the air again, stripped of its old power. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Carter, did you inform your parents that you intended to stop these payments?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steady. "I told them 3 months ago that I would be ending financial support once the mortgage was fully paid. I gave them written notice and offered to help them budget moving forward." "And their response?" I hesitated only briefly. "They told me I was abandoning them, that I was unstable for thinking I could cut off family." A faint sound escaped Maya, something between a breath and a sob. The judge nodded slowly. "I see." My attorney then requested permission to submit additional evidence. Text messages appeared on the screen. Not angry ones, not dramatic ones, calculated ones, messages between my parents. "She's cutting us off. We need to secure things before she does something reckless. If we can prove she's unfit, we can manage the accounts. It's for her own good." Each line was time-stamped. Each line was real. My mother's face drained of color as the messages were read aloud. My father's gaze hardened, but he didn't interrupt. The illusion of concern was dissolving. The judge shifted his attention to Maya. "Miss Carter, were you aware of these payments?" She froze. My mother whispered her name sharply, but the judge raised a hand. "She will answer freely." Maya's hands trembled. For a moment I saw the little girl who used to sit beside me during thunderstorms, clutching my arm because she was afraid of loud noises. "Yes," she said finally, voice cracking. "I knew." The courtroom held its breath. "She paid my tuition," Maya continued. "Every semester. I didn't have loans because of her." Tears spilled down her cheeks now. "They told me not to talk about it. They said it would make her feel superior." My chest tightened, but I didn't move. "They said if she stopped helping, it meant she was unstable and selfish," Maya whispered. "I didn't want to believe that. I didn't want to pick sides." The judge's expression softened toward her, then hardened toward my parents. "Did you encourage this petition?" he asked. My father opened his mouth, but Maya spoke first. "They said it was the only way to protect the house and savings. They said she was spiraling because she wanted independence." The word independence felt different in that room. It no longer sounded rebellious. It sounded reasonable. The judge leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "So to summarize," he said slowly, "the alleged instability appears to coincide precisely with the cessation of voluntary financial support." Silence. No one argued, because there was nothing left to argue. For years, I had been told I was dramatic, difficult, too sensitive. I had internalized it, questioned myself, doubted my own memory of events. But under fluorescent lights and legal scrutiny, the truth looked remarkably simple. I had provided, they had relied, and when I chose to stop carrying them, they tried to carry me straight into legal control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defending myself emotionally. I was simply standing in facts. And facts, unlike manipulation, Don't tremble. The ruling came quietly. There was no dramatic bang of a gavel, no raised voices, no cinematic pause. The judge adjusted his glasses, reviewed the documents one final time, and spoke in the same measured tone he had used all morning. The petition for conservatorship is denied. 4 simple words, but they carried years of weight. He continued, explaining that the evidence demonstrated clear financial competence and voluntary support rather than instability. He noted the troubling nature of the petition's timing and intent. He ordered that my parents cover the legal fees associated with the case. Then it was over, just like that. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood. Papers were gathered. Conversations resumed in low murmurs. The world did what it always does. It kept moving. My parents did not look at me. My father walked out first, his posture stiff, his pride wrapped tightly around him like a coat. My mother followed, her expression unreadable, as though she were already rehearsing a version of events where she was misunderstood rather than exposed. Maya lingered. For a moment I thought she might approach me, apologize, explain. But she only looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry." I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't rejection, it was simply acknowledgement. Outside the courthouse, the sky was brighter than I expected. The air felt different, lighter, not because I had won something, but because something heavy had finally been set down. My attorney shook my hand and told me I had handled myself with grace. I thanked her. Grace hadn't felt like a choice. It had felt like survival. When I reached my car, I didn't cry. That surprised me. For years I had imagined that if I ever proved them wrong, if I ever stood in a room where the truth was undeniable, I would feel triumphant, victorious, vindicated. Instead, I felt calm. Revenge, I realized, isn't always loud. It isn't cruel or theatrical. Sometimes it's simply the quiet act of refusing to be reduced. Over the next few weeks, I changed my phone number. I updated my emergency contacts. I met with a financial advisor to add extra layers of legal protection around my assets. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. I also did something else. I created a small scholarship fund. Nothing flashy, nothing public. It was designed for students who had been financially cut off by family as a form of control. Students who needed just enough help to finish what they had started. The first time I approved an application, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where that envelope had once rested, and felt something shift inside me. The money I had once sent to maintain obligation was now building opportunity. That was my revenge, not punishment. Transformation. Months later, I drove past my parents' house once. The mortgage I had paid was fully theirs now. No leverage attached. No invisible strings. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. They had tried to convince the court that I was unstable, that I needed to be managed. But stability isn't obedience. Sanity isn't submission. And love is not ownership. I had loved them in the only way I knew how. Through sacrifice. When I chose to love myself instead, they called it illness. The court called it independence. And in the quiet of my own home, surrounded by walls no one could claim but me, I finally understood something that had taken me years to learn. Freedom doesn't shout. It simply walks away and never looks back.